Ambassador Sarah stood at the entrance of the great assembly hall and looked at the massive doors before her. They were made of a metal that shone like gold, but was stronger than anything found on Earth. Behind those doors sat the representatives of over 400 alien species. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and they had ruled the known universe for nearly 50,000 years. Humanity had been part of this council for only 12 years. 12 short years since the first contact. 12 years since the scout ship had crashed in the mountains of Tibet and changed everything humans believed about their place in the universe. Sarah took a deep breath. She had been ambassador for 3 of those 12 years, and every single day had been a battle. Not a battle with weapons, but a battle with words, with pride, and with the endless condescension of species who saw humans as nothing more than clever animals who had somehow learned to build spaceships. The doors opened, and Sarah walked inside. The great assembly hall was enormous. It could hold 10,000 beings at once, and today it was nearly full. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. Floating platforms carried delegates from species that could not walk. Swimming tanks held those who lived in water. Special chambers with different atmospheres kept alive beings who could not breathe oxygen. And in the center of it all, on a raised platform of white stone, sat the High Council. 7 chairs, 7 species, the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. High Counselor of the sat in the middle chair. His species looked something like tall, thin birds with 4 arms and feathers the color of deep space. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire. Ambassador said, and his voice echoed through the hall, "You may approach." Sarah walked forward. She could feel thousands of eyes watching her. Some of those eyes were curious. Many were hostile. A few showed something that might have been pity. She had requested this emergency session 3 days ago. It had taken all her political skill just to get them to agree to hear her speak. "High Counselor," Sarah said, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you for allowing me to address the assembly. I come to you today with grave concerns about the treatment of human colonies in the outer territories." A ripple of sound moved through the hall. Some aliens murmured to each other. Others made noises that served as laughter in their cultures. Counselor of the leaned forward. There were a reptilian species with scales that changed color based on their mood. Right now, scales were a deep orange, which meant he was annoyed. "Ambassador, we have heard your complaints many times before. Your people settle on worlds that others have claimed. You expand too fast. You breed too fast. Perhaps if humans showed more patience." "Patience?" Sarah interrupted. She knew it was rude to interrupt a High Counselor, but she was tired, so very tired. 3 human colonies have been attacked in the past 6 months. The collective has destroyed our settlements on 7. They killed 40,000 people, men, women, and children, and when we brought this to the council, you did nothing. The hall went quiet. High Counselor spread 2 of his hands in a gesture that humans had learned meant dismissal. They claimed those worlds long before your species left your home planet. They were within their rights under galactic law. "Those people had been living there for 8 years, Sarah said. "They built homes, schools, hospitals, and they bombed them from orbit while this council watched and did nothing." "The law is clear," said Counselor of the same species whose crashed ship had introduced humanity to the galaxy. She was tall and gray-skinned, with large black eyes that showed no emotion. Humans settled on those worlds without proper authorization. The response was excessive, but not illegal. Sarah felt her hands shake. She pressed them together to hide it. "Then I ask the Council to change the law. I ask you to recognize human colonies as protected under the settlement accords. I ask you to condemn the attacks and demand reparations for the families of the dead." For a moment no one spoke. Then slowly High Counselor shook his head. "We will vote on your request," he said. "All those in favor of recognizing human settlements under the settlement accords." Sarah watched the voting boards around the hall. Each species had a light that could turn green for yes or red for no. Slowly, the lights began to change. Red, 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 red. Green lights appeared here and there, but they were few and far between. Some species abstained, their lights staying white, but the overwhelming majority glowed red. When the count finished, only 47 species had voted yes. 312 had voted no. The rest had not voted at all. "The motion fails," announced. "Is there other business to discuss?" Sarah stood frozen. She had expected this result, but some small part of her had hoped for something different. Some small part of her had believed that justice might still mean something among the stars. "Ambassador," said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like satisfaction. "You may return to your seat." Sarah did not move. "Ambassador, you are dismissed." Something changed in Sarah's face. The diplomats and observers who were watching her would later describe it in different ways. Some said she looked angry. Others said she looked sad. But most agreed that in that moment, Ambassador Sarah looked more dangerous than any human had ever looked in the halls of the Galactic Council. "No," she said. The single word fell into the silence like a stone, dropped into still water. "Excuse me," said. "I said no. I will not return to my seat. I will not continue to beg for scraps of justice from a council that views my people as animals." Sarah reached up and removed the golden badge that marked her as an official ambassador. She looked at it for a moment, then dropped it on the floor. The sound of metal hitting stone echoed through the hall. "Humanity requested membership in this council 12 years ago," Sarah said, and now her voice was loud enough to reach every corner of the massive chamber. "We thought we were joining a community of civilized peoples. We thought we were joining a galaxy that valued peace and cooperation and justice. We were wrong." She began walking backward toward the exit, never taking her eyes off the High Council. "You have shown us what we truly are in your eyes. We are newcomers. We are primitives. We are inconvenient. You watch our people die and you do nothing because our lives mean nothing to you." Ambassador's voice was sharp now, angry. "You go too far." Sarah stopped at the doors. "No, High Counselor, I haven't gone far enough." She turned to face the entire assembly, all 400 species, all their representatives and observers and servants. "Let the record show that on this day, humanity withdraws its petition for full membership in the Galactic Council. We withdraw from all treaties, all agreements, all obligations. From this moment forward, humanity will stand alone." And then Sarah turned and walked out of the great assembly hall. Behind her, the cosmos stared in horror. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every civilized world knew what had happened. Humanity had left the Galactic Council. The young species that everyone had dismissed as aggressive primitives had thrown away the greatest opportunity their kind had ever been offered. On the council worlds, the initial reaction was shock, then came amusement, then came satisfaction. "Let them go," said Counselor in an interview after the session. "They will crawl back within a year. Humans cannot survive alone in this galaxy. They need us far more than we need them." This was what most species believed. Humanity was young. Humanity was weak. Humanity controlled only a tiny portion of space compared to the great empires. Without the protection of the Council, without access to Council trade routes and technology, they would surely fail. But on Earth and the human colonies, the reaction was very different. Admiral James sat in his office at Earth Defense Command and watched the recording of Ambassador's speech for the 5th time. Each time he watched it, he felt the same thing: pride mixed with terror. Pride because Sarah had done what he had wanted to do for years. Terror because he knew what was coming next. His console beeped. It was a priority message from the President of the United Earth Government. "Admiral, please report to the Emergency Council, meeting immediately." James stood and straightened his uniform. He was 62 years old and had spent his entire adult life preparing for war. Not war against other humans, but war against the galaxy itself. Because he had never believed, not for one moment, that the alien species would accept humanity as equals. The emergency council was gathered in the underground bunker beneath the presidential palace. Around the table sat the most powerful people in human civilization: the president, the security advisor, the heads of the military branches, and the leaders of the major colonial governments. Ambassador was there too. She looked exhausted but also somehow lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "What happened in that chamber changes everything," the president said. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. Her name was, and she had been leading humanity through this turbulent time for 6 years. "We need to discuss our options." "We have no options," said the security advisor, a worried-looking man named David Park. "We've just made enemies of the entire galaxy. The Council controls all major trade routes. They control access to faster-than-light communication networks. They control the banks. They control everything." "Not everything," Admiral said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "They control a lot," continued. "But they don't control our worlds. They don't control our ships. They don't control our people. And they certainly don't control what we've been building in secret for the past decade." The room went very still. President leaned forward. "Admiral, I think it's time you briefed the full council on Project Prometheus." Nodded and touched a button on the table. A holographic display appeared, showing a section of space that was hidden behind a dense nebula, far from any Council patrol routes. "For the past 10 years, Earth Defense Command has been preparing for this day," said. "We hoped it would never come, but we always knew it might. Project Prometheus is our insurance policy." The display showed dozens of shipyards hidden in the nebula, hundreds of warships of designs the Council had never seen, weapons platforms, mining stations, manufacturing facilities. "How is this possible?" asked the colonial governor of Mars. "The Council monitors all our ship construction." "They monitor what we show them," replied. "They see the small patrol fleet we officially maintain. They don't see this, because they never bothered to look. They were too certain that we were too primitive to deceive them." Ambassador was staring at the display with wide eyes. "How many ships?" "Currently, 412 combat-ready vessels, another 200 in various stages of construction." Paused. "And that's not counting what the colonies have been building on their own." The colonial governor of Titan spoke up. "Titan Shipyards has 97 ships ready. The Jovian colonies have about 60 more. We've been coordinating in secret for years." "So we have a fleet," said Security Advisor Park. "That's good, but the Council has thousands of ships, tens of thousands. We can't fight the entire galaxy." "We won't have to," said President, "because we're not going to start a war, we're going to finish one." She looked around the table. "Admiral, tell them about Phase 2. Changed the display. Now it showed a map of the galaxy, with human space highlighted in blue. Surrounding it were the territories of various alien species. "The Galactic Council is not as unified as it pretends to be," explained. "There are cracks, species that have been marginalized, species that have been conquered and forced to join, species that hate each other but cooperate because they have no choice." He pointed to several regions on the map. "We've been making quiet contact with some of these groups for years. Nothing official, just conversations." "What kind of conversations?" asked. Smiled grimly. "The kind where we learn that we're not the only ones who are tired of being treated like second-class citizens. The kind where we discover that the Galactic Council's authority is built on fear, not respect. The kind where we realize that the galaxy is ready for change. It just needs someone willing to light the match." The room was silent as this information sank in. "So," President said finally, "here's what we're going to do. We're not going to crawl back to the Council. We're not going to beg for forgiveness. We're going to show the entire galaxy exactly what humanity is capable of when we stop asking for permission. She stood and looked at each person in the room. Contact everyone in Project Prometheus. Activate all assets. Reach out to our potential allies among the subjugated species, and prepare our colonies for what's coming. What exactly is coming, Madam President? Asked the governor of Mars. His eyes were hard as steel. Freedom, she said. For us, and for everyone else the Council has crushed beneath its boot. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity doesn't know how to give up. We don't know how to surrender, and we certainly don't know how to stay quiet when we see injustice. She looked at the map of the galaxy, at all those stars and worlds and peoples. They thought they were getting rid of a nuisance. They're about to find out they've unleashed a revolution. 6 months had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was beginning to realize that something was very wrong. High Counselor sat in his private chambers and read the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. Everything was happening too fast. Nothing was going according to plan. The first shock had come within weeks of the human withdrawal. The Coalition, a group of 3 small species on the edge of Council space, had announced that they were suspending their membership. Their ambassador had given a speech that used many of the same words Ambassador had used. Had dismissed it as coincidence. There had always been troublemakers. Then the Trade Federation had done the same thing. Then the Consortium. Then a dozen smaller species, one after another like falling dominoes. And now this. Tell me again, said to his intelligence chief, a named Prex, slowly. Prex looked nervous. His feathers were ruffled in patterns that indicated extreme stress. The humans have made contact with the broken worlds, he said. Multiple contacts, diplomatic missions, trade agreements, military consultations. Felt his blood turn cold. The broken worlds were what remained of species that had tried to rebel against the Council in the past, shattered civilizations, conquered peoples. They had been divided and isolated specifically to prevent them from ever organizing again. That's impossible, said. The broken worlds are scattered across the galaxy. They have no way to communicate with each other, no way to coordinate. The humans found a way, Prex swallowed. They've been visiting them one by one, in secret, using ships that our sensors apparently cannot detect. Stood up so fast that his chair fell backward. Our sensors cannot detect human ships. How? We don't know. Our scientists are analyzing the data, but they've never seen anything like it. The humans seem to have developed a stealth technology that's, well, it's better than anything we have. This was impossible. Humans were primitives. Their technology was generations behind Council standards. Everyone knew this. Everyone had always known this. There's more, Prex said reluctantly. The collective, the ones who destroyed those human colonies 6 months ago, they've gone silent. What do you mean silent? No communications in or out. No ships leaving their territory. Our scout ships that entered their space have not returned. Prex hesitated. There are rumors that the humans, that they've done something to something terrible. Felt fear for the first time in centuries. They were not weak. They had one of the largest fleets in the Council. They had been spacefaring for 30,000 years. Find out what happened, he ordered. Send a full investigation team. I want answers. Yes, High Counselor. After Prex left, stood at his window and looked out at the endless city that covered his. Billions of his people lived there, secure in the knowledge that they were among the most powerful species in existence. For the first time, wondered if that was still true. In the human system of Tau, Admiral stood on the bridge of the S Prometheus, the flagship of humanity's new fleet. Around him, officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. Status report said, all ships in position, Admiral. The defense grid has been neutralized. Their fleet has been disabled or destroyed. Ground forces are securing the primary population centers. Nodded, the battle had been surprisingly easy. They had expected their enemies to fight the way Council species always fought, slowly, cautiously, with lots of warnings and ultimatums. Humanity didn't fight that way. They had struck without warning, hitting every military installation simultaneously. They had used weapons that the Council had never seen, weapons designed by human engineers who had spent decades studying Council technology and finding ways to defeat it. They had been so confident in their superiority that they hadn't even considered the possibility of a serious attack. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already over. "Casualties on our side?" asked. 12 ships damaged, 2 destroyed, 347 personnel killed in action. Closed his eyes for a moment. Every death weighed on him. But he thought of the 40,000 humans they had killed, the colonies they had burned, the children they had murdered, and he felt no guilt. And their military has been effectively eliminated. Civilian casualties are minimal. We followed the rules of engagement. Good had been very clear about that. This was not a war of extermination. This was a war of justice. And justice meant punishing those responsible while protecting the innocent. A communication officer spoke up. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the government. They're requesting terms of surrender." On screen, the face that appeared was that of the High Commander. He was a creature of sharp angles and dark eyes, and right now those eyes were filled with something had never seen in an alien face before: pure terror. "Human Admiral," the commander said, "we surrender. We will accept any terms. Please, please stop." Looked at this being who had ordered the deaths of 40,000 innocent people. He felt no sympathy. "Here are our terms," said. "You will pay full reparations to the families of every human you killed. You will surrender all territory you have claimed from other species. You will disarm completely and submit to human oversight for the next 50 years. And you personally, along with everyone in your command structure who authorized the attacks on human colonies, will stand trial for crimes against humanity. Those terms are unacceptable." "Then we will continue," made a gesture, and the transmission began to close. Wait, the commander's composure cracked completely. We accept your terms, just please no more." Nodded slowly. "Smart choice. You have 12 hours to begin compliance. If you fail to meet any deadline, we will resume operations." He ended the transmission and turned to his officers. "Send word to Earth. Phase 1 is complete. They have been neutralized." He paused. "And make sure the entire galaxy knows what happened here. Let them see what happens when you attack humanity." Within days, the news had spread everywhere. The Collective, one of the most feared military powers in the galaxy, had been utterly defeated by the primitive humans in less than a week. The Galactic Council held an emergency session, demanded that all member species contribute ships to a joint fleet that would bring humanity to justice for their unprovoked aggression. The vote was not what he expected. Over 100 species refused to participate. 50 more abstained. Even among those who voted yes, many were clearly reluctant. The galaxy was watching, and what they saw was changing how they thought about everything. In the assembly hall, stood alone on his platform and felt the foundations of his power beginning to crack. "This is just the beginning," he said to himself. "We will crush them, we must crush them." But even as he said the words, he wasn't sure he believed them anymore. 2 years had passed since humanity left the Galactic Council, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. On a small world at the edge of what had once been Council space, a gathering was taking place. Representatives from over 50 species had come together in secret. They met in an underground chamber, away from the eyes of Council spies and surveillance systems. At the center of the chamber stood a human. Her name was Captain Maya, and she had been conducting diplomatic missions to oppressed species for 18 months. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know the risk you're taking by being here. The Council would destroy you if they knew." A delegate from the species, a small being with silver skin and large eyes, spoke up. "The Council is already destroying us. Slowly, they take our resources. They take our young people for their armies. They tell us we should be grateful for their protection." The delegate's voice was bitter. Protection from what? From themselves. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. "Humanity offers you something different," said. "We don't want to rule you. We don't want to take from you. We want partners, allies, equals." "Pretty words," said a delegate. "The Council said similar things once long ago. How do we know humanity will be any different?" Smiled, "You don't. You'll have to trust us, and I know trust is hard when you've been betrayed so many times." She looked around at all the faces, so different from human faces but all showing the same fear and hope. "But I can tell you this. Humanity knows what it's like to be underestimated, to be dismissed, to be told that you don't matter. We will never do that to you." The meeting continued for hours. When it ended, 43 species had agreed to join what was being called the Free Alliance. Not all of them could contribute military power, but all of them could contribute something: resources, information, technology, or simply the courage to stand up. As the delegates departed, the representative approached. "I never thought I would live to see this day," they said. "For generations, we believed resistance was impossible, that the Council was too powerful to challenge." "The Council is powerful," agreed, "but power built on fear is fragile. One crack and the whole thing can shatter. And humanity is that crack." Thought about this? Maybe, or maybe humanity is just the one who showed everyone else that cracks were possible. Meanwhile, on the Council, things were falling apart. High Counselor had not slept properly in months. The reports on his desk grew worse every day. Species leaving the Council, economic systems collapsing as trade routes were disrupted, military commanders refusing orders to attack human positions. And the humans themselves seemed to be everywhere at once, even though that should have been impossible. They appeared in places they shouldn't be able to reach, said things they shouldn't be able to know, and vanished before anyone could stop them. "How are they doing this?" demanded at yet another emergency council meeting. "They have fewer ships than us. Their territory is smaller than ours. By every measure, they should be losing." Counselor of the spoke up. Her people had been the first to make contact with humanity, and she had been studying them ever since. "I have been analyzing their strategies," she said. "The humans have a concept they call asymmetric warfare. It means fighting in unexpected ways, using your weaknesses as strengths and turning your enemy's strengths into weaknesses." "That makes no sense," snapped Counselor. "It does if you understand how humans think." Activated a display showing a timeline of human history. Their species has been fighting among themselves for their entire existence, war after war after war. They have developed more ways to kill each other than any other species we've encountered. The display showed human conflicts, ancient battles with swords and spears, then guns and explosives, then tanks and aircraft, then nuclear weapons and cyber warfare. "They are not more advanced than us," continued, "but they are more creative. They approach war as a problem to be solved, and they have had millions of years of practice solving it." Stared at the display with growing horror. "There's something else," said quietly, "something I've only recently understood." She changed the display to show human cultural symbols, flags, monuments, art, music. Humans have a quality that is rare among spacefaring species. They call it determination, or stubbornness, or never giving up. "We know they are stubborn," said impatiently. "That's not news." "No, you misunderstand." Looked at her fellow council members. "When most species face impossible odds, they calculate the probabilities and make rational decisions. They retreat. They surrender. They accept reality." As they should. Humans don't do that. His voice was very serious now. When humans face impossible odds, they don't accept them. They become angry. They become determined. They convince themselves that surrender is worse than death, and then they fight harder than ever before. She pulled up records from human history. Soldiers holding positions against overwhelming force, civilians resisting occupation for decades, prisoners enduring torture without breaking. Every time we hurt them, they become more committed to hurting us back. Every victory we win makes them more determined to keep fighting. There is no amount of pressure that will make them submit. It only makes them stronger. The council chamber was silent. "So what do we do?" finally asked. Hesitated. "I don't know, but I do know that our current strategy is failing. Every attack on humanity just proves their point, that the council is their enemy, that they were right to leave, that there is no future for them within our system." "Then we destroy them completely," said. "We gather every ship we have and we wipe them out." "And if we fail?" asked. "What happens when we throw everything we have at humanity and it's not enough? What happens when the rest of the galaxy sees the mighty council defeated?" No one had an answer. On Earth, President was meeting with her cabinet about a very different matter. "The Free Alliance is growing faster than we expected," she said. "We need to think about what kind of galaxy we want to build after this is over." "Assuming we win," said Admiral. "We'll win," said it with absolute certainty. "The question is what comes next. We can't become what we fought against. We can't build just another empire." "What do you suggest?" asked Ambassador, who had become one of the president's closest advisors. "Something new, something the galaxy has never seen." Pulled up a document she had been working on. "I'm calling it the Principles of Free Association. The basic idea is simple. Any species can join the alliance and any species can leave at any time. No species can be forced to fight for the alliance, trade with the alliance, or obey the alliance. We exist to protect each other's freedom, not to control each other." The cabinet members read through the document. It was radically different from how the Galactic Council operated. "Some species won't like this," pointed out. "Some of them want us to be their new protectors, their new masters." "Then they don't understand what we're trying to do," shook her head. "We're not trying to replace the council. We're trying to make the council unnecessary. We're trying to build a galaxy where every species can chart its own course, where no one has to kneel to anyone else." "It's idealistic," said softly. "Yes," smiled. "Humanity at its best usually is." 3 years after humanity left the Galactic Council, the war came to its end. It did not end with a great battle. It did not end with the conquest of the Council or the destruction of their fleets. It ended, like many human conflicts had ended throughout history, with exhaustion and change. The Galactic Council simply stopped working. Too many species had left. Too many trade routes had been disrupted. Too many local governments had stopped obeying council directives. The elaborate system that had maintained order for 50,000 years was falling apart, not because someone destroyed it, but because nobody believed in it anymore. High Counselor called one final meeting of the full assembly. When the delegates arrived, they found a chamber that was half empty. The species that remained looked tired and uncertain. Stood on his platform and looked at what remained of his power. Once, his voice had commanded obedience from 400 species. Now, barely 100 answered his call. "We face a choice," he said. "We can continue to fight a war we cannot win. We can watch our civilization crumble. We can hold on to our pride until there is nothing left to hold." He paused, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on him. "Or we can do something that the Council have never done before. We can admit that we were wrong." Gasps echoed through the chamber. In all the history of the Council, no High Counselor had ever said such words. "We were wrong about humanity," continued. "We saw them as primitives because they were young. We dismissed them because they were different. We tried to control them because we were afraid of what they might become. He spread all four of his hands in a gesture of openness. And look what our fear has cost us. He activated a display showing the current state of the galaxy. The Free Alliance controlled nearly a third of known space. Species that had been council members for were now independent or allied with humanity. The council's military power had been cut in half. If we continue on this path, there will be no council left to fight for, said. The will survive we always have, but everything we built will be gone. Counselor stood up angrily. So you suggest we surrender, we bow to these humans? No, shook his head. I suggest we talk to them, not as superiors, not as enemies, but as equals. I suggest we try to understand what they actually want, instead of assuming we already know. They want to destroy us. Do they? Looked at the counselor. In 3 years of war, humanity has not attacked a single world that did not attack them first. They have not committed any atrocities against civilians. They have not even tried to conquer the who attacked them unprovoked. They just demanded justice and left. He pulled up records of human actions during the conflict. Time after time, humans had shown restraint. They had accepted surrenders. They had protected non-combatants. They had even provided aid to species that were neutral, including some that were still technically council members. This is not how an enemy bent on destruction behaves, said. This is how someone behaves when they want to prove a point. And what point is that? Asked Counselor. Turn to face her. That they deserve to be treated as equals, that their lives have value, that the galaxy does not belong to us alone. He lowered his head. The same things we claim to believe but failed to practice. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, Counselor spoke. I will support opening negotiations with humanity. The people are tired of fighting. Other voices joined hers. One by one, representatives from dozens of species called for peace. Not all of them, and several others stormed out in anger, but enough. For the first time in 3 years, there was hope that the war might end. The negotiations took place on a neutral station in unclaimed space. Ambassador Sarah represented humanity. High Counselor represented what remained of the Council. They met alone, in a simple room with a table and 2 chairs. Thank you for agreeing to this, said. Thank you for asking. Sat down and looked at the alien who had once dismissed her so easily. He looked older now, worn down by the weight of events. I won't pretend we don't have good reasons to hate each other. A lot of people have died. Yes, his voice was heavy. I am responsible for many of those deaths. If I had listened to you 3 years ago, if I had taken your concerns seriously. If you had been different than you are, you mean, shook her head. You can't change the past. Nobody can. The question is what we do now. They talked for hours. They talked about the structure of a new galactic order. They talked about reparations and justice. They talked about how to integrate the Free Alliance with the remaining Council species. They talked about trade and travel and all the practical details that make civilization work. But mostly, they talked about principles. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, said. We never did. We just wanted to be left alone to live our lives. When you wouldn't let us do that, we fought back. When others asked for our help, we gave it, but we have no interest in becoming the new council. Then what do you want? Thought about this for a moment. We want a galaxy where every species can choose its own path, where no one has to bow to anyone else, where disagreements are solved through talking, not fighting, where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Was quiet for a long time. That is very different from how the galaxy has always worked. Yes, smiled slightly, that's kind of the point. It may not work. Species have conflicting interests. Some will always want power over others. Then we deal with those situations as they come up. We don't pretend we can control everything. We just try to build systems that make peace easier than war. Considered this. In his long life, he had always believed that order required control, that civilization required hierarchy, that some species were simply meant to lead and others to follow. But he looked at Ambassador, this human, this representative of a species that was barely out of diapers by galactic standards, and he saw something he hadn't expected. He saw wisdom. "Very well," he said, "let us try your way, let us build something new." They shook hands, an awkward gesture for her, but managed it. Outside the station, stars burned in the endless dark, as they had burned for billions of years and would continue to burn for billions more. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the nature of civilization. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had not replaced one empire with another. Instead, they had done something far more remarkable. They had shown the galaxy that there was another way. In the years that followed, the new order slowly took shape. It wasn't perfect. No system ever is. There were conflicts and setbacks and moments when it seemed like everything might fall apart. But it held together, because enough species believed in it, because enough people were willing to work for it, because humanity, those stubborn and determined beings, refused to give up on the dream of a better galaxy. Ambassador continued her work until she was old, building bridges between species that had never spoken before. Admiral retired to a quiet colony where he spent his days gardening and teaching young officers about strategy. President lived long enough to see the first generation born under the new order, children who grew up in a galaxy where the idea of one species ruling over another seemed as strange as an ancient myth. And High Counselor, who had once been so certain of his superiority, dedicated his remaining years to helping his people adapt to a universe where they were no longer masters but partners. History would remember the day humanity stormed out of the Galactic Council as the beginning of a new era. Not an era of human dominance, but an era of freedom. An era when the galaxy finally grew up. The cosmos had stared in horror when humanity walked out of that chamber. But in the end, the cosmos had learned something important. Sometimes, the ones who refuse to accept the way things are become the ones who show everyone else how things could be. Sometimes, the youngest voices speak the oldest truths. And sometimes, when you push a species hard enough, they don't break. They rise.